Uh, a great pleasure to be here. Particularly delighted to listen to Mr. Porter. India is growing at about 7.6% per annum. We are an oasis of growth in the midst of a very, very barren economic landscape across the world. But the challenge for India is to grow at even higher rates over a long period of time, 3 decades or more, to be able to lift a very, very young population above the poverty line. We are passing through a window of demographic transition, which rarely happens in history. 72% of our population is below the age of 32. And to my mind, this is the biggest social and economic transition that is taking place across the world. That the population in India is getting younger and younger, and the population across USA and the western part of the world is getting older and older. Now, if we have to grow at higher rates, what do we need to do? And I entirely agree with Mr. Porter that social index is very critical, and I'll dwell on some of those issues. But the challenge is that India has made itself, in the last 65 years, last 68 years, a very, very complex, very complicated, and a very difficult place to do business in. And one of the challenges we face when I was Secretary DIPP is that how do we make India easy and simple? When this government came into power, Mr. Modi's first directive was make things easy and simple. How do you do away with a vast number of rules, regulation, procedure, laws, and acts that have been built up over the years, year after year after year? So one of the things that have been done in this country is that we've scrapped 1,175 laws in the last 2.5 years. 1,175 laws. We've brought in the goods and services tax so that there can be one tax across the country. We've brought in the bankruptcy law so that exits can be easier. We've reduced the number of forms for export and import from 11 and 9 to 3. You can register a company in 1 day. A medium and small enterprise can register in 5 minutes on the net, so on. So everything is being made simpler, but a lot of that work in progress. But India is a very large country. It's bigger than 24 countries of Europe. And one of the challenges we faced was that how do we make the states easier? Because private sector comes and invests in states. And therefore, one of our challenges was that we need to make the states easier. And in 2015, we started the Ease of Doing Business Index for the states. And we worked with the states to look at 100 outcomes along. We moved away from inputs and processes, which are not the concern of citizens, but to outcomes. And we worked with the states to prepare those outcomes, and we worked with the states to work on those outcomes. And we created a huge sense of competition among states, and then we ranked the states. We got a third party, that is the World Bank, to evaluate. And based on that, Gujarat was #1 first year. But the good thing was that in the second year, a new state like Telangana totally smashed Gujarat. It knocked out Gujarat, and Telangana and Andhra came #1 and 2. Gujarat was after that. But the very good thing that happened was that emerging states like Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, which are the mineral-rich states of India, and which have been absolutely laggard states, they did radical changes in labor laws, in land laws, in opening businesses and exiting businesses, and they did such vast number of changes that Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand came 4th and 5th. And that really showed that there was huge competitive spirit simply because we created a portal. We created a portal, and on a minute-to-minute basis, states could find out whether they were going up or down. And therefore, to my mind, the only way India will improve is when we force our states to compete. We are able to measure, and without measurement, it will not be possible for India to improve. And therefore, this business of measuring states against outcomes and against competition, on a regular competitive pressure on a day-to-day basis, so that they get to know on a daily basis whether they're going up or down on a portal, and that at the end of the year, their rankings are announced. So my belief is that you need to not merely rank states, you need to name and shame states. And you need to put it in public domain. You need to tell states, you need to tell the electorate why some states are doing very badly and why some states are doing very well. And the electorate should throw out governments which are not performing well. So that is what my belief is. And that's born out of my experience of ease of doing business. I think the other good thing that's happened as a consequence of this ease of doing business is that the government started ranking districts on cleanliness. I mean, as the Prime Minister says that no Prime Minister gets into cleanliness, but one of the things he drove was that there's too much of dirt, there's too much of open defecation, there's too much of filth around, rank districts on cleanliness. And therefore, the Ministry of Urban Development ranked districts on cleanliness. And this has had a revolutionary impact in states like Uttar Pradesh, where the new chief minister came in, and he's driven all the district magistrates really to change the faces of cities to make them the best performing districts in terms of cleanliness. So my belief is that over a period of time, these states will become these districts will become far more cleaner. So in the ranking of districts on cleanliness, we moved below the states into the districts. Now, one of the key challenges to my mind is that while India is growing at 7.6%, it's not possible to grow at higher rates of 9 to 10% over a 3-decade period till India doesn't improve on education and health and nutrition. And these are key to India. And why it doesn't improve on education, health, and nutrition, I'd like to focus on. So if you look at health, and if you were to look at the latest NFHS data, this is how India stacks up. Indian states perform in terms of infant mortality, and this is how Indian states, the red are the worst performing states, the greens are the better performing states, and the yellow are the average states. And if you look at the maternal mortality, this is how India average is 41. The red ones are those who are performing very, very poorly. And so you get a feel of how states are performing within India, infant mortality and maternal mortality. And this is, if you were to look at it, this is directly correlated, absolutely directly correlated to how the doctors, the regional skew of health infrastructure and manpower in terms of doctors' density, in terms of the total bed density. And a clear perspective comes in that unless you don't transform 7 or 8 states of India, it is impossible to get the benefit of window of demographic transition. It is impossible for India to achieve social progress. And the red, unless we are not able to make the reds into green, it will not be possible. And it's not that there are no doctors. There are doctors. But you go to Bihar, there are doctors, they're all based in Patna. They don't go to rural areas. You go to UP, the doctors are all in UP, in Lucknow and Allahabad. They're not going to rural areas. And you look at the total bed density, this is the picture you're getting. We move on to education. And one of the key gains of education in recent times has been the fact that India has been able to provide access of education to all. Each and every individual has got access to education to all. But the quality of education has radically fallen. And so a class 5 student is not able to read a class 2 English in, the Indian average is 48.2%, but the reds are areas where a class 5 student is not able to read class 2 English, or a class 2 even his mother tongue. And that is the big challenge. But if you look at maths, India does relatively well. While the average is 48.2, you'll see the red areas where states are not performing well in terms of maths. So you have the language, reading comprehension, and you have the maths performance here. And therefore, again, we need to attack these states. But we moved on, and we then moved on, and we looked at India in terms of its districts, and where the problem is really. And if you look at dropout rates at elementary level, the red areas where the dropout rates at elementary level, according to the UDICE data of 2015-16, is very, very high are all these red areas. And if you were to look at people-teachers ratio, the red areas are the real challenging areas. And this is in terms of education. If you were to look at the health survey index, the health index, the red areas are these districts where health is a major challenge. If you were to look at nutrition, where children under 5 who are stunted, those are the districts where there's a massive challenge in terms of those who are challenged. And if you were to look at lack of, and to my mind, connectivity is a very major issue in terms of road, and country has really driven Pradhan Mantri Gramin Sadak Yojana now. But still, a lot of habitations still remain unconnected. And those habitations which remain unconnected are the ones in red here. And the ratio of BPL population, the below the poverty line population to total population, is there in that red area. So what I've tried to really do is to superimpose all these indices in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of lack of connectivity, in the ratio of BPL to total population, and then looked at all these factors, health, education, poverty, and roads, and then put it on the map of India. And this is the perspective you get, that unless we don't transform these 150 odd districts, the challenge of India lies in these 150 districts. Until we don't perform these 150 districts of India and we don't measure their performances on a monthly basis, and these districts don't transform, India can never transform. It's not about states. It's important to go lower down at the district levels and transform them. And these 150 districts, measurement on outcome basis of their performance on a regular and constant basis, and putting that outcome in public domain on a regular basis, and shaming these districts in terms of their performance holds the key to India's progress. So I'm a great believer in outcomes. I'm a great believer that India can never progress till we don't dent this health, education, and nutrition. We don't make an impact. Till we don't make an impact of turning reds into green, until we don't transform these red 150 districts into green, India can never transform. And the key lies in measurement of outcomes and nothing else. And so therefore, NITI's objective is to transform them and to not merely to challenge these districts and these states, but also to handhold them, to act as a facilitator, as a catalyst. And therefore, we've put out these state challenge methods. We are working to rank these states, and we are ranking these districts, but we are also saying that we'll help you to transform. And therefore, during the next 3 years, every year we'll pick up 3 states to work in partnership with them on these outcomes to help them to transform them. But we are only picking up states which will have the political and the administrative will to transform themselves. Unless there is political will in those states itself, it will be very difficult for us to transform. And therefore, we are selecting these states on a challenge route, and we'll handhold them to do this. But my view is these 150 districts holds the key to India growing at 9 to 10%. And India can never grow at 9 to 10% over a 3-decade period without a radical transformation in its health, education, and nutrition. Thank you very much.
Amitabh, can you stay for just 5 or 10 minutes for a couple of discussions? Thank you very much. Yeah, I love this stuff. You know, I love this data, love these maps. Absolutely compelling. I love this focus on this 100+ states which are going to really determine the future of India. Can I just, a topic that's come up a number of times today has been about data. What's the quality of the data underlying this? What are the challenges? What are the plans to improve that data going forward?
Well, these data are very, very reliable. They're based on external data. They're based on national level data. These are widely acceptable data by all across the country. Nobody has disputed these data.
So one thing I saw on some of the data was like the source data was like 2011 census.
But you know,
and one thing's sort of timeliness.
No, the data is very reliable, but you know, the challenge for all of us, our challenge for all of us is not to measure districts or states on historical basis. Because, you know, I mean, you measured on historical basis. Kerala will always be #1. I belong to Kerala. I worked there for very long. I've spent 35 years of my career. But historically, Kerala will always be #1. The challenge is to measure states on the basis of their delta, how they have changed during the course of the year. So you must be able to establish the baseline and see the change, challenge them to change during the course of the year. Challenge them so rigorously, so such a challenging method that you capture the change during that year. The delta is important, not historically.
And has there been a result that's really surprised you? Is there like a district or a state where you've gone, wow, I was not expecting that result?
No, my belief always has been that if you transform 7 states of North India and Eastern India, you won the battle for India. The challenge lies in North India. The west of India and the south of India does very well. The south of India is, in terms of social indices, in terms of the quality of life, in terms of the physical quality of life index, the South India does very well. Each one of those states have excelled themselves. The west of India does reasonably well. It's the northern part of India, which has lacked governance, which has lacked political leadership, and which has lacked the administrative ability to deliver. And those states need to be shamed.
And that's why you're a big fan of ranking. You think the rankings can help drive that change.
My belief is that without ranking, go beyond ranking. You got the ranking. Then put it out in public. Put it out in every household. And then the challenge is to do extension and mass communication with that ranking. Put it in everybody's head that their government is not performing. Your job is to name and shame the government which is non-performing. It's not about just ranking. Ranking will remain on paper, but take it down further. Use all the media with you to tell the politicians that those states are not delivering.
And that's really powerful, because I think one thing we thought about when we were designing Social Progress Index was the importance of having a composite index that could produce that kind of result that will actually attract the attention of the media. Because you've got to be able to have that ranking, that single number, to get people interested and to really drive that change.
No, so I greatly agree with Michael Porter that it's very important to have a social index. You can't have economic development for a long period of time. It's not possible till you don't achieve quantum jump on education, health, and nutrition. That holds the key to India's growth.
I love it. A quantum jump in education, health, and social indicators.
And to my mind, it's very doable.
And it's doable. Ladies and gentlemen, Amitabh Kant.
But one of the big things in this government is that they've moved away from inputs and processes to outcomes. And outcomes hold the key to the success.
Amitabh Kant. Thank you very much.